this short video, we're going to look at simple percentages. Now, a percentage is a fraction, and it's a fraction out of 100. So let's start with a very simple percentage. If I said, what is 50% of 20, then I'm doing 50 hundredths of 20. We should know that 50 hundredths is a half. So 50% is half of what we originally have. So now half of 20 is 10. So 50% of 20 is 10. So let's try a few more. What is 50% of 18? Well, 50% of 18 is a half of 18, which is 9. What about 50% of 250? Well, 50% of 250 is a half of 250, so our answer is 125. And finally, what is 50% of 0.8? Well, a half of 0.8 is 0.4, so 50% of 8 is 0.4. And remember, 50% is half of whatever amount you had to start with. So let's move on now to 10% of amounts. Now, finding 10% of something is finding 10 100ths, which is 1/10 of what you had to start with. And finding 1/10 is fairly easy because we simply divide by 10. So, for example, 10% of 80 is 80 divided by 10. So the answer is 8. 10% of 80 is 8. So let's try a few more. So 10% of 60 is 60 divided by 10, which is 6. 10% of 350, what you might also know when you divide by 10 is you move your decimal point in one place. So 10% of 350 is 35. And using that same rule to move that decimal point one place across, then 10% of 55 is 5.5. And finally, 10% of 8, or equal, well, we always have a decimal place to the right of our number, comes over the 8, so it's 0.8, which we can write as 0.8. Wouldn't be wrong if you wrote 0.8, but it looks better with the 0. So 10% of 60 is 6, 10% of 350 is 35, 10% of 55 is 5.5, watch my little point, and finally 10% of 8 is 0.8. So how do we find 5% of 40? Well, 5% equals half of 10%. So we find 10% first, so 10% of 40 equals 4, so 5% of 40 will be equal to half of 4, which is 2. So let's try 2 more. 5% of 60, well 10% equals 6, so 5% will be half of 6, will equal 3. Now 5% of 280, well 10% of 280 is 28, and 5% will be half of 28, so 5% will equal 14. So remember, to find 5% of an amount, find 10% first, and then half that. And that's the short video on simple percentages. Over.